Described as a serious national political project after the multi-party democracy, devolution enters its sixth year, but instead of moving forward, we are throwing back on the progress so far made. Now, this is why such a forum offers perfect opportunity not only to celebrate the achievements, but more importantly, share the challenges. Tonight, Sidebar is grabbing this opportunity to interrogate devolution 6 on through the eyes of a governor, a senator, and someone who believes devolution must be given an opportunity. But first, it's my take tonight. And tonight we talk about devolution. It's been 6 years, just enough time to ask questions about the viability of these independent entities and the effectiveness in resource generation and utilization. Right from the onset, it must be acknowledged that devolution revolutionized management of public affairs. Now, dispersal of resources to the grassroots and the creation of local-based institutions, the county assemblies and the sub-county committees to make decisions on behalf of the people on development matters, empowered citizens and stimulated growth in the counties. Now, previous system where all resources were kept at the national level and decisions made by the few for many was dysfunctional, disenfranchising, and of course patronizing. And worse, it led to skewed development where regions that had powerful political leaders benefited at the expense of the others. Now, to be sure, the best illustration of devolution is the fact that some regions saw tarmac roads or the first medical surgeries only through the county system. Now, infrastructure development and economic growth expanded largely because of devolution. Even so, devolution has created a new set of challenges. Now, the first is the over-reliance on the national government for financial upkeep. Constitutionally, the National Treasury is required to disburse at least 15% of the income based on the audited annual financial reports to the counties. In addition, the Constitution provides for the Equalization Fund and support those marginalized areas. Now, all these were intended to guarantee equitable resource distribution and inspire growth all around, whereas this marks or makes a basis for substantive portion of development across the county. It has engendered a culture of dependency. Counties literally depend on the subversions from the National Treasury for sustenance, such that when the funds are delayed, they are thrown into crisis. Now, put differently, counties were expected to create own income. However, available reports show this is a mirage. Resource collection has dipped at the counties as contrasted to the defunct local authorities. While still, corruption has been devolved with resource grossly misapplied. Now, reports by the Auditor General perennially show massive looting and pilferage within the counties of public funds. Discrimination, nepotism, favoritism have also taken center stage. Now, the week-long conference right here in Kirinyaga County 020 goes beyond mere leaving the talk show to a serious platform that examines critical issues and provides solutions to the ills affecting the counties. Now, counties must be supported to thrive, but on their own must also eradicate graft, nepotism, and the jeopardizing of operations in the counties. Now, in the words of Joseph Story, a good government implies two things. First, fidelity to the objects of the government, and secondly, acknowledgement by the means by which the objects can be best attained. My guests tonight, Professor Kivutha Kibwana, Wanjiru Gikonyo, Moses Kajwang, and Kimani Chungwa. My name is Ken Mijungu. We are live from county number 20, and Governor Waiguru is our host tonight. Join the conversation online at NTV Kenya at Ken Mijungu. Sidebar on the road begins right now.
Kwa safari hii tunatumia sauti ya Wakenya.
Tujaona maendeleo ile ambayo tulikuwa tunatarajia.
Unapata maendeleo haipatikani. Ufisadi umekita mizizi.
I've accepted that we have not done very well when it comes to revenue collection, including myself.
The national government has resisted releasing money it previously held.
Health still should have remained with the national government.
Health being devolved, there is greater concentration by county governments in making sure that health is managed in the best possible way.
And of course, we are waiting for the two senators, Moses Kajwang and Senator from Kiambu County, that's Kimani Wamatangi. The president is still around, so he was meeting the senators, and they said they'll be a little later. As soon as they join us, we'll have the conversation with them. But welcome, Governor, and welcome, Wanjiru. Let me begin with the governor, and you have been here also, but it is said Devolution Conference has become a political process rather than the process that it was intended to be. For example, will you be here tomorrow?
Definitely, and part of the reason why I'll be here tomorrow, I'm an official of the meeting, so I cannot afford not to be here tomorrow. And even if I wasn't, in the past, I have tried to be in the conference throughout.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking that question, Governor, is because it said when the president leaves, the executives leave, the governors leave, the deputy governors leave, and tomorrow we'll see the technocrats, such as Wanjiru here.
Oh, well, I think this is a meeting with a difference, because we have now for 6 years experienced devolution, and we are taking stock, and we are seeing fantastic examples of the power of devolution, what counties are able to do. Indeed, I was sharing with a friend a while back that if you take the best examples from the counties, the 47 counties, one can get a picture of what Kenya, could become. There is enough lessons there to actually inspire our country. And I think in your introduction, you talked about certain things that never happened before, like, for example, in northeastern Kenya, where there were no tarmac roads, where you couldn't have a cesarean, where, there literally weren't hospitals, until people from there used to ask you, when you're traveling to the rest of Kenya, they would tell you, go and greet Kenya.
Okay.
They didn't think that they were part of Kenya. But today, when we sit with colleagues, they're actually, saying, okay, now we think we are part of Kenya. So I think even in terms of in the introduction, you said, like, we get money from the center and we don't raise much money. If you look at the Constitution, the intention is not for counties to actually raise real taxes. They raise cess, maybe, land rates. They don't have leeway to actually levy proper taxes. And that is why there is, on the whole, reliance on money from the center. And the Constitution has given functions like health. It's a function which, by and large, is given to the counties, agriculture. So the money which before used to do those functions must follow the functions, and that money must come from the national treasury to the county. So I think really devolution is God sent for Kenya.
Okay. That concern, Wanjiru, that by tomorrow the executive shall have left, because this is a political process. They want to show up when the president is here, and then they leave the next day. You believe?
Thanks, Ken. I don't know what you mean by technocrat. I'm not a technocrat. I'm in civil society.
Yes.
And so I'm not part of government. And we exist to hold government to account and try to do that as well as we can as a countervailing force, not a technocrat per se.
Okay.
I think devolution is a political process. This is a political meeting. That's okay. And I think it's very important to have a forum where governors come together, their executives come together, and discuss what's happening with devolution. And it's important for two things. One, because of the learnings. The other thing is because devolution is under attack. As you said in your opening statement, there's an effort to re-centralize devolution. And I think if the governors were very quiet about what they're doing and didn't really shout about devolution, devolution may be written off, because Kenya has a history since independence of re-centralizing and killing decentralization efforts. It's what the central government has always done. So I think it's very important that we have this conference, And I'm not sure that governors disappear.
No, they do.
I haven't kept a head count.
Yes.
But I think the conversations go on and are important. They are so important so that as civil society, we have reached out to the Council of Governors and we insisted that there needs to be more citizen voice, because the problem is it's the political leadership talking to themselves and talking to the funding partners and a few civil society. But where is the public? Because devolution is about the people.
Okay.
And we're happy that this year that there's a plenum that's been dedicated to the Mwananchi. These citizens were picked through the consultative forums that took place. So this forum is actually growing and developing every year in terms of form. And it's, I think, our responsibility to keep challenging the Council of Governors to make sure it's participatory. It's the voice it has the voice of Wanjiko, but let us not deny that there is a need to celebrate and trumpet devolution, especially because it is the strongest and best part of our constitution.
Okay. The governor is lucky because he's one of the top achievers, right, of devolution. He has been mentioned all over, and what he's done in his county is good. But, Governor, looking wholesome to the 47 counties, is there a real achievement of devolution that we should celebrate in the last 6 years?
I think there's really a lot to celebrate, because when you go to any of the counties, you really see a lot of economic activity. And listening even during today's deliberations, you can see counties trying to develop cottage industries, actually beginning to develop what will be manufacturing, what will be industrialization, just like happened during the Industrial Revolution in Europe. There has been fantastic development in terms of, for example, health, where even before the national universal health system was announced, you had experiments at the counties, and you had attempts to really provide primary health care. Actually, through the Marifa Center, that is the center that collects best practices from the counties, there isn't a single county where you cannot witness new things that are happening. And that's why I said earlier that if you take the best practices from these counties and you put them together, actually, you will now see the new Kenya through these counties, through devolution. And that is why the president, in announcing the Big Four agenda, announced agriculture, which is a devolved function, announced health, which is a devolved function, and even housing is shared, and of course now manufacturing in terms of the initiatives that the counties, in terms of the building of cottage industry. So even the national agenda is being driven by the devolution agenda, and I think most Kenyans, when they go quote home from Nairobi, those who are working in the towns, the big towns, sometimes you can almost ask yourself, but I didn't leave this building here, I didn't leave this development here. So I wish in 1963, 1964, we did not abort devolution, the regional system, because
you feel it would be far.
We would be like Malaysia, like Indonesia, like those great Asian countries who are at par with us at independence.
I listen to you and I get a sense of devolution really working. Let me find out first from Wanjiro. Is devolution really working in this country, to be honest?
I'm surprised you can ask that question, because we had 50 years of centralized government. And of course, around the Constitution and the overwhelming numbers that voted for the Constitution, devolution was a really big factor in terms of people saying we are tired of centralized and at that point autocratic kind of governance, and we want to say, what is devolution? Because devolution isn't the governance. Devolution is voice to the people. Devolution is services coming from government and being close enough for citizens to be able to raise a complaint if they're not happy. I was talking to some of my colleagues as I was preparing for this meeting, and they were saying, look, we've been undertaking social accountability work for quite a while now, and we've been able, in counties like Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, to influence budget decisions where the government was planning to build some infrastructure around the health sector, and because of the involvement of citizens decided, no, we're going to invest in softer aspects, in the personnel, in the drugs. So that is what devolution, I think with the media, and I think maybe with many of us, there's a temptation to look at devolution as our political leadership. Devolution is about political power, but that power is supposed to go to the people. So the question we should be asking is, do we have enough devolution? Because we have power that's gone to the county level. Has that power gone to the citizens? Have these counties been adequately enabled? Because I think when you make the argument of dependency,
yes,
you forget that in 50 years the central government did not invest in core services. For instance, you look at the water sector. Water sector was so poorly resourced that counties have inherited an infrastructure that's very dilapidated, and most water service delivery actually is done through community-based initiatives and not by the water companies. Water companies are able to serve urban areas, but a lot of rural providers rural communities aren't reached by the formal system. Why? Because of 50 years of underinvestment. So when you then come and say, well, devolution is here, you need to raise all the money, you're ignoring that they have started on a weak footing because the investment wasn't there, the infrastructure wasn't there. So counties are not only setting up new structures, they have to deal with the historic underinvestment.
Okay.
And that money has to come from somewhere.
Do you agree with the governor? Do you agree with the governor that if we didn't kill devolution in the early 80s, we'll be with the likes of the Asian tigers, if I must say?
In fact, we don't have it. I totally agree. And I think the one problem we have, and when I listen to the president in his speech, and every time I read the budget policy statement, I think this government looks at devolution as a footnote. It's national government has all these plans, and then there's devolution.
Yes.
And they're going to do little honey projects, and they're going to do little macadamia projects, but it should be the other way around. The big projects are the projects that are being done by the county. We need to get all these small farmers and aggregate them and give them access to those larger markets so that money, real money, can go to these smaller farmers, and then you begin to deal with reducing the inequalities. Then you go to creating jobs. Then you go to dealing with 85% of Kenyans who are in informal sector anyway. So I think devolution is about participatory governance like we are seeing in Makueni. It's about being people-centered, and it's not about just big manufacturing. It's not about big projects, big initiatives. It's really about what is Kenya's economy driven by, and how do we invest in those drivers?
Having said that, the question to Professor then would be, if you look at the intention of devolution, what the 2010 Constitution intended devolution to be, do you believe it's being done as per the Constitution? Are we implementing devolution the way the Constitution intended it to be?
You know, the Constitution, of course, is a living document. Some aspects of it, of course, can be aspirational in terms of you have a constitution, you try to run a government, exercise power, democracy according to it, and it doesn't always, it's not always the case that you will do exactly what the constitution says. And I think as has been stated earlier, the first 5 years were experimental. One could even say the first 10 years are usually years of experiment. If you take the example of our independence, for about 10 years, the new people came into power after the colonial regime. We are also experimenting. But in Kenya, devolution has actually worked faster than one could have imagined when you take the example of other countries where federalism was adopted. So although we are trying to change the constitution after 6 years, I can say myself, from the point of view of devolution, we have tried to follow much what the Constitution says, particularly for the county government. Sometimes the national government passes laws which try to undermine the Constitution, you know, and take away some of the powers. So, as perhaps this conference will demonstrate, we have really, you know, made significant strides. One thing that almost made me cry today in this meeting was to see children who at their own conference come to present their views to this congregation and ultimately to the president. Of course, we expect that those views will be acted upon, but you can see something that never used to happen when you know, children, the youth, persons with disability are able to really come and say, this is my voice, take my voice into account. And in Makueni, just during this budget making process, we had like 9,000 kids, you know, coming to say, what is it that they think about what happens in the county, what happens in the country, issues that touch upon them. And they are completely eloquent, which tells me that devolution is beginning to bring the voice of the voiceless onto the table. And in Makueni, during our public participation, like we are reviewing all the projects we have done since 2013, the people were, you know, doing that with the administration and the assembly. And sometimes we would be told that that officer doesn't work. Please don't leave him here. Go with him.
Okay.
So I think, although sometimes there are attempts at the national level of curtailing this spirit, but I think it is unstoppable.
Okay. One of the reasons why I asked that question to you, Prof, is one of the aspects that devolution was supposed to be seen as having succeeded is resource distribution to get to the grassroots level. Mm-hmm. Last year, I attended a press conference by the governors, and one of the things that was said is that even by that time, the funds that were supposed to be sent to the counties had not been sent. Give or take, it's usually increased by 3 billion, 2 billion, but again, it goes back to the regional value. But the fact that even if I asked you today, if you have received all the funds that you needed to have received in the last financial year, have you, as a county received that amount of money?
Definitely there are challenges, and part of the problem, of course, is the public debt, because you have to pay the interest in the first instance before you can disburse to counties, and we are getting delays in terms of getting money from the national government. But on the whole, by the end of the financial year, in the past, the money has arrived, although sometimes it arrives until you cannot use it, it is rolled over into the next
So in other words,
year.
you're admitting that that aspect of devolution doesn't work?
I'm admitting that at the national level, there are often challenges. And some
Why
of
you
the
taking
challenges,
flak for them, Governor?
it has been admitted, for example, in this meeting, that there is rampant corruption. There is almost runaway corruption. And the president, you know, has said that this is something that is going to fight as hard as he can. For example, if one dam, 30 billion, gets lost, then it means that is money which would like go to 5 counties per year.
Okay.
Just one dam.
Do you get the sense that he is taking an excuse for the national government?
No, I think Governor is a supreme gentleman, and that is his manner. And if you read his words, he's being very critical of the national government, but very politely. And maybe that's why Makueni is such a success, because with that kind of tone, then you're going to bring everyone round the table. But I think there's a couple of things that maybe need to be revisited. One, you know, and I don't know how you do this when you have a national government that really is not fully on board of the devolution agenda. There was the Intergovernmental Loan and Grants Council that was anticipated, that a devolved system should have an intergovernmental mechanism around even the national government's borrowing because of the impact it has on counties. I think given the catastrophic management, debt management of the national government, it is high time that provision was revisited. And then the other is, Governor, with regard to this monthly disbursements, that's a regulatory aspect. That's not the Constitution.
No.
And I think that was put in place because of the plunder of the local authorities and the fear that counties would come up and would receive lots of money and misspend it. Isn't it time to the county government the counties just said, it's time up. Can we get quarterly disbursements in line with the reporting, because the reporting is anticipated to be quarterly? And can it then not be as stringent, there are stringent requirements that are in place? And instead of micromanaging the counties, could there be a system where, yesterday I was on following a conversation with Senator, with the senator who was saying that they have made recommendations for stoppage of funds to some counties who did not report adequately for the monies that had been disbursed, but those monies were still disbursed, so that the oversight isn't working. So instead of micromanaging counties, counties should be given their money. And if they misspend it, then they shouldn't receive more money.
Okay.
Because there are provisions in the Public Finance Management Act that allow for stoppage of funds when money has been misappropriated.
When you can
rather
account
than
for it.
putting straitjacket.
I'd like to speak more about the relationship between the national government and the county governments. But first, we take a break right here, County 020. We're coming back with this discussion. And when we come back, one of the things that I want to know, you've spoken about borrowing, how the national government borrowing has impacted on the counties and specifically the disbursement of funds. Because top of my mind, I'm thinking they borrow too much, expend it, the revenues in paying back the debts. Until the time they need to send the money to the counties, they don't have anything to send it. So we're coming back with that discussion. Stay with us. We're right here coming back with Sidebar. And we are back with Sidebar from County 020. Kirinyaga County Governor Anne Waiguru is hosting the Devolution Conference, the 6th Devolution Conference, and I am joined by Professor Kivuta Kibwana and Wanjiru Gikonyo. And of course, we were expecting the two senators to join us, but they were meeting the president after the conference. Unfortunately, they are not here, so the show has to go on. Let's take this to the next level of discussion. And first, I'll read this tweet from someone who calls himself Governor Sengeli. He says, every time I read the budget document, I get overwhelmed by cruciating worries of how a county given 9 billion shillings will use 70% on recurrent expenditure on 6,000 employees, leaving 30% for the development of 4 million people. Governor.
I think maybe before responding to that, this question of counties receiving money on a monthly basis, this is a new development. It never used to happen. Previously, when we started devolution, money would come on a quarterly basis. Today, it's not even on a monthly basis, but you request money and you must demonstrate what you're going to use it to pay. And of course, it makes life very difficult in terms of dealing with contractors, service providers. And sometimes they are even beginning to get hesitant about taking county jobs. And we are looking when there's the possibility of a constitutional amendment to really also get money to come to counties the same way it does to the national government, so that the Kenya Revenue Authority will be mandated to also take money to counties just like it does at the national level. It is true that a lot of money is going into the wage bill, and that figure of 70% wage bill and recurrent expense is a correct figure for both the national government as well as county governments. We found people were employed by the local authorities, We found also people who had been employed by the national government and who are devolved to counties. And we also, employed some people because there were certain skills that were not available. And today the president made a very important statement, I think, saying that this is not tenable. We cannot continue to spend most of the money on salaries and recurrent expenditure. It is time that this was reviewed. And so I'm in agreement with the gentleman who has made this comment.
Okay. Wanjiru, how has the borrowing by the national government impacted in terms of disbursement of funds to the counties? And is that not one of the challenges that has undermined devolution in this country?
Yeah. And could I just quickly add on the issue of staff?
Okay.
At the outset of devolution, there was a process in the transition mechanism that was anticipated, whereby there was supposed to be a head count and a kind of warehousing of government staff and a redeployment of staff in line with their skills. Now this assumed, of course, that there was political will to redeploy officers from national government to county level, and that there was the political will for national government to cooperate with county governments in this regard. It never happened. The Constitution requires national government to build the capacities of county governments, because county governments are nascent. I mean, they're still only 6 years old compared to the government that's been around for, over half a century. So there is still a capacity building aspect that the national government is supposed to have done and didn't do. So it's great that there'll be a discussion about it, but even as the president says that, how come the national government wage bill has been increasing year in, year out? Why didn't the national government implement the parastatal reforms that were supposed to shed off a lot of bloat that is sitting there and also merge them and also release money that's supposed to go to the counties? So there's an elephant in the room. And that elephant in the room is that national government has not done its part to reduce the cost of running government, and national government is expanding, yet a lot of the work has gone to county government. So as the president said that, I thought, wow, he's got fantastic speechwriters. And I think he has made that statement before. Whether we'll see action or not, I do not know, but we do have a problem. But I think the biggest culprit is actually the national government. So on the issue of debt, I think we mentioned that. First of all, what was the debt procured to do is a big concern, because it's a lot of debt, it's very expensive debt, and experts spoke to this about what are the terms you're borrowing on, what is the repayment of this investment, and what is the opportunity cost of this model that, the decisions that were taken. So, of course, it's had an impact on the funds available, not just to county governments, because the money doesn't just go to counties, it goes to service delivery. So money is being taken away from buying of medicine, from payment of teachers, from payment of nurses, to repay really expensive loans. And that's a concern. The second concern with that is that the decisions that were taken around where the money should go are questionable. And I think if you've been listening to the Auditor General, he's been asking for authority and funds to be able to do performance audits so that he can question some of the decisions that are where money is being spent, not just corruptly, but on wasteful projects or projects that aren't sustainable, or other criteria that don't bring value to citizens. And this problem is with the national government, it's unfortunately also with the county governments. Counties don't have enough money, but the little money they have, some of it is, a good amount in some of the counties is being misappropriated. And then the other is being used to build stadia, to, build development, to make development priorities that ignore the fact that basic services are not being well delivered. So we laud you, Professor Kivuda, because you came out and you've invested in really the human, human development. Make sure people have good health care, investing in agriculture so that households have incomes. That's where the money needs to go, not into mega infrastructure projects that have kickbacks and unfortunately impoverish the people at the counties even more.
Okay. Governor, I don't know if you have a comment in terms of that, how that has impacted on you.
Well, I think in terms of the fact that we don't have enough money to do the things that must be done, and particularly to really move agriculture, to work on value chains, to work on extension services, to work on irrigation, to work on the markets. For me, when, for example, you spend a lot of your money, doing that kind of development, as we today were told about Kirinyaga, their coffee, and so on, Nyandarua potato, and places, macadamia, and so on. When you do that, I think that's when you begin to really have the counties changing Kenya. And it is my hope that, we will do that. One must admit that there will always be episodes of corruption at national level, at county level. One cannot deny that, and that's why, again, we welcome real efforts to change this so that more money is available for really devolution to do what it was intended to do through our constitution. And I think the one thing that I picked from this discussion is initially we never costed the functions. Like to say, okay, the county will do health, the county will do agriculture, the county will do about 14 functions, and the national government will do the rest. But we never said how much money will these functions cost, so that the money can, follow those functions. That never happened through the transitional authority. We never even asked ourselves, in our county, the development that happened from independence, which areas had actually received more development, which areas were truly marginalized, so that then there would be a real focus as well on those regions to bring them up to speed, so to speak, with the rest of the country. And even the equalization fund, some money that was supposed to be put aside through the national government again to balance development, it took quite some time for that money to be made available. So I think it is this commitment to devolution can be a game changer, and indeed it is a game changer. Therefore, the leadership in the counties, the people in the counties, the national government as well, we should protect it. We should not think that it is challenging the prestige of the national government or the national government, because if we succeed as counties, it's the national government succeeding, because we are one country. And I think when we kind of change our philosophy, and I think that is perhaps beginning to happen, to see that the success of devolution equals the success of Kenya.
Okay. You've spoken about the national government and sort of stealing the shine from them. But I'd like to talk about the same disbursement, the monies that go to the counties. One of the things that has been said about counties, they are not very prudent, good managers of these funds. You are lucky, Professor, you're running a county that is a model county to most of the counties. In fact, when we asked a question earlier about the counties and the hits and misses, they said 1 hit and 46 misses, and they were referring to your county. But the question is the fact that the devolved funds are seen as funds that are meant to enrich a few, because that's the perception they have created. There are several governors with court cases who are being queried about one thing or the other. And this brings in the question of the devolved corruption to the counties. Does that bother you from where you sit, when you sit with your peers, the other governors? Does it bother them that they are seen as thieves or people who are not really doing the right thing for the citizens?
I think for most of our counties, I can talk about hits, not necessarily misses, because the money that we are getting, actually, which is strictly speaking less than 15% when you calculate it properly. And a lot of that money that we get, first of all, goes into salaries, it goes into the recurrent, so that we have like 20% left. When you look at what has been done in most of these counties, you will say, yes, some of this money, or a lot of this money, is actually doing real development work. As I said earlier, it is in our nature as human beings to do things the wrong way. And I don't want to say that even within our counties, within Makueni, I will not say that there isn't corruption. But the idea is when we get people who are corrupt, they should be processed mercilessly, so that people know that that's not an option. And I think that's the stage we are waiting for. We are waiting for a situation where people who do wrong are caught, they are taken to court, they are processed, people go to jail, the monies that they've taken from the public is recovered. I think personally that even as we think about changing the constitution, we should have the Anti-Corruption Commission within the constitution, so that it is independent, it has prosecutorial powers, so that they really don't have to shy away from processing anybody. You see, like I said earlier, if in one dam about 30 billion is lost, and that's money which goes like to 5 counties per year, and that's just one dam. And in the media and so on, you have seen all these episodes, of corruption. Suppose, such money went into the counties and it was put to good use, and we strengthened the systems of accountability. If the senators were here, that would be a very important discussion, because as governors, we have said that we should go to Senate, we should accept, oversight. We should be oversighted by the county assemblies, and by and by, we will strengthen the systems that are in the constitution if new systems are also introduced, and we will go places as a country.
Okay, so until that happens, we'll still be asking this question. But let me hear Wanjiru's opinion about devolved corruption.
Very good. Devolved corruption. Devolved government is national and county. I think there's this temptation to think of devolution, or rather to think of devolution as just county governments. Devolution is both, and corruption is a problem at both levels. We have a culture of corruption, and it's not to be condoned, but there isn't enough action being taken, as the governor has said. But I think we have to be very careful about the narrative of painting counties as corrupt, painting counties as funda mechoka, they're too expensive. This narrative is being spun for a reason, because there are people who believe that central government should still be the one calling the shots and have not fully come on board with devolved government. There's also Kenyans who, although they voted for devolution, are easily swayed when they see a lot of negative press to think maybe we made a mistake, despite the fact that they are seeing services for the first time in some areas. So let's be very careful of these half narratives and how they are used by, to really taint corruption with the intention of re-centralizing, because I think, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but looking at the trends, if it were not for the gallant, really, work of the Council of Governors that has really fought to secure the devolution space, I think the Senate has played also some role in stopping bills that have sought to re-centralize. We would be talking about devolution as history. And if you look at what happened to local authorities in Kenya, it was small little amendments. A little amendment here, you take away a little power, a little power. In the end, you have a huge structure that has no power. It becomes a shell of an institution, badly tainted, that really is a cautionary tale. So there is a push for re-centralization, and I think as the media, let's get a full narrative. When we say there is corruption has been devolved, you say yes, because under Kenya is devolved, national and county government have a problem. Auditor General reports show that both levels have a problem, and national government anyway is holding 85% plus of the money. And so the problem is actually bigger there. But then we come to the issue of the fight against corruption. Have the things that need to be done been done? And I think we're still talking about a lot of lip service. And I could see on some of the commentary earlier, actually, it was really saying that there's more talk. Like I keep saying, the president has amazing speechwriters, but I don't think people are wowed anymore. The first corruption speech he made really shook the country, and people were waiting for action, but we didn't see it. Because there are things we'd like to see. Campaign financing. This is a very simple thing. You don't need to change the constitution. How come they haven't dealt decisively with disclosures around campaign financing? There's also the issue of conflict of interests, because if you read at Chapter 6 of the Constitution, it was trying to separate state officers from private business, so that you stop having the situation we have with the dams, where CS sets up companies and is then trading, these companies are then trading with government. It's complete conflict of interest, terrible corruption. We saw it also in the NYS. This is simple. Government can today just say, we are going to stop this practice, because it has been shown that this practice is the root of of corruption within government. And no matter, and prosecuting corruption, by the way, is very difficult. And anti-corruption experts will always tell you that the hardest thing you can do is to prosecute corruption. It's much easier to prevent corruption from happening. So there should be, more attention paid to these measures. Then the other thing is access to information. I think there have been requests for bilateral contracts that government is making at the national level. Much as the president is saying, let's get procurement contracts out there, they are not putting out the contracts for the big infrastructure projects that the national government is running. So we are having a lot of lip service, we're not having example. So if we could just simply implement the provisions that are in the Public Finance Management Act, and then pass the campaign financing legislation, and then institute this separation, this conflict of interest clause, so that we can stop public officers from doing business. It's very radical. Maybe many would leave public office, and we'll be left with people who genuinely want to serve Kenyans. After all, nowadays they have good salaries. It's not like before when they didn't. So I think the last thing is that at county level, we need more social accountability. And again, Professor Kibuda, I think you get tired because people sing your praises so often, but you've really done well. And I think there, like you said, there are other counties that are also really coming up in terms of open up contracting. We want open contracting. We want budget, kind of budget days where budget information, budget reports are given to the public to interrogate with information and in a way that they understand and can really see what was done. Right now we have program-based budgeting, which can really hide a lot of information and make citizens not able to engage properly. So county governments can just proactively do some very simple things to make sure that they are transparent and accountable, and that will close those loopholes for graft.
Okay, let me go to the next area of discussion. And Governor, I'd like to talk about the national government in relation to the duplication of services, right? Or duplication of the key role of the national government and the county government. We have seen a duplication right at the top. What the county government sort of does is what the national government want to do. If you look at even the structures that have been set, we have the chiefs and the sub-chiefs, they have the county administrators and all that. This duplication, how has it affected service delivery and devolution generally?
I think when there is duplication, particularly for services that are very clearly like county services, because if you take health, the national government in the first instance will make policy, because it makes policy for all areas in the country. Sometimes counties also domesticate policy, but policies that preserve the national government. Now, when it comes to health, in terms of delivery of health, apart from the referral hospitals, is supposed to be the work of a county government. And you will remember, we had a major problem, disagreement, when some equipment was bought for us. And it was bought for us, there was no consultation. Of course, in some of the counties, it was equipment which maybe people could not have easily outsourced. But some counties had already bought, so they were like getting, you know, a second double.
Yes.
So again, that is something that really requires, you know, proper coordination, because we are wasting resources if we do the same thing twice, so to speak. Within the Constitution, there is provision. If, as a county, there are some things we can't do, we can ask the national government to do, and vice versa. For example, we have argued that for primary school education, for buildings and so on, counties should be doing that. And so I think as devolution matures, this temptation to do things that are supposed to be done by another level of government, this is something that we should get away from, so that when you concentrate on what the Constitution says you need to do, then it means that we will use resources properly, and it means that we will be more effective in terms of delivery. But I also want to just make a small comment on this question of campaign financing. It is something that had been identified as a major problem, and actually a piece of legislation had been developed to ensure that people have limits to what they can spend during campaigns. But that was suspended so that we could still continue to spend as much money as one has, and you know, that's a big problem. And I again think that in terms of also dealing with corruption, another option is when people now apply for state jobs, during the interview they are told, we want to know how much, you know, money you have, you know, your assets and all that kind of stuff. And they do that in the open domain. They first of all write to say that this is what I have, even my, you know, spouse, my family, like people under, if there are some people under 18 and so on. They disclose even companies that they have beneficial, you know, ownership. So why not ask all public servants that, okay, since we have this problem, we want to really know what everybody has who is in the public domain. And we say lifestyle audit, first of all, disclose. And when you disclose, this is going to be a matter for the public to be able to interrogate. And then there will be lifestyle audit, so that, you know, I will say this is what I have, this is what my spouse has. We don't have children who are under 18. So that therefore, some of the people, you know, there's an option. If you don't want to do that lifestyle audit,
you don't
then
go to
you
the
can
public
say,
service.
then you can say, I don't want to be in the public service.
Okay.
And of course, the anti-corruption can still follow you. But I think until we really do, like what has happened abroad, when they really decide that they must fight corruption, they take measures that are earth-shaking. And I have this feeling maybe we are at that stage, and maybe we'll see some measures that will show clearly that we are fighting corruption. Because a friend of mine told me that corruption is the last nail on the Kenyan coffin, and we really don't want to be buried.
I'm talking.
Can I?
Yes, you can. As you add to that, I'm thinking of areas of water, I'm thinking of agriculture, I'm thinking of roads and all those duplications, not just in terms of structure.
Yeah, and possibly the governor will be able to speak to it more from a more practical point of view than I could. But on the issue of corruption, there's also the issue of appointments. I think the threshold was set very low. And unfortunately, this was done under the coalition government. Because when the Leadership and Integrity Act went to the cabinet, I think it was in 2011, there was a very strict provision that if you are charged of a crime while in public office, or a crime, any sort of crime, you're then not eligible to hold office. And you are then not given the kind of protection you're given, where you have to wait until the court determines, until the judgment, because essentially you now have to actually be sentenced. And that gives a lot of leeway. You know, people are named in the Auditor General report. If we're going to give strength to the Auditor General, apart from giving prosecutorial powers, then being named in an Auditor General report should be enough basis for you not to hold office, not to be eligible. So this recycling of people who have gone into a ministry and done really dubious things, been cited in government reports and then moved on, is a problem. Not only because of the impression it creates that corruption does indeed pay, but also because then, of course, when they go on, they continue to perpetrate the very same problem. In terms of duplication, I think there's the issue of duplication, and there's also an issue of conflict of mandates. Like in the water sector, what you're finding, yes, there's this duplication, and what's at the heart of it is who should have a say on what aspects. So that the institutions that were in existence before the Constitution dispensation that are possibly not relevant now, and those functions should be now given to the county governments or the county or to the water companies. The other area where there is duplication, and there has continued to be duplication, and we are seeing more of them, is around the funds. We have a lot of funds that go to various aspects, and funds usually go where the government doesn't reach. And they are very good social protection mechanism, they're very good inclusion mechanism. But they become very dangerous when they become the way government conducts business, because one, it reduces the ability of the county government to respond to citizen demands. It kind of ties their hands because there are so many conditions on the spending that counties have. But there's a lot of duplication around the funds. Now, there's a positive move because I understand there is a process going on to harmonize the youth-related enterprise kind of funds and put them into one pot. And this is very important because all these funds have different administrative structures, and none of them actually have a monitoring structure. So we are spending money, create a fund, spend money, it's stolen, you remove that board, so-and-so resigns, create another fund. So not only are they duplicating, they are then not being monitored for impact, they're not being monitored for effectiveness. So we are actually doing very, very bad development. So Kenyans need to understand that money is getting lost, not just through corruption, but through the failure to establish administrative structures that are well harmonized. And in terms of duplication, I was sitting in the trade panel this afternoon, and it was very interesting because the discussion again came up about decisions that the national government makes and how they affect counties, and in many cases counties aren't even aware or privy to these conversations, and some of those agreements that counties are making, national government is making, aren't then available. And then you look at the trade policy of 2016 that creates an intergovernmental structure in trade management. And this structure has not been implemented. So there is actually very good policy that is pointing towards harmonization and collaboration, but implementation is a problem. So we are moving, but I think there needs to be more push for those kind of mechanisms to be put in place and for these contestations to be resolved.
Okay. Everyone agrees that indeed devolution is working, but there is also this school of thought that says that where we're headed, we're actually clawing back on the progress that we've made in the last 6 or 5 years, because we're just reviewing this. Could that be true? That and what areas would you identify and say that we are doing poorly? We started well, but we're going back.
Maybe again, before answering that, I like in the German system, people work at the federal level, and they can be transferred to the equivalent of counties, and from counties to the federal level, so that you can get an experience of working in a county, in our situation, and then you can go and work in the federal system, so that the public service is like one public service. In Kenya, we haven't achieved even getting people to come from one county and be transferred to another county. But I think if, for example, people at the national level could come and work in the counties, they would really now begin to appreciate what is this system, what are the issues in this system, so that some of the decisions that therefore people take at the national level, and they don't kind of sometimes appreciate the real impact at the local level, after some while that would begin not to happen. And I think as we again think of changes, that perhaps is an important change, so that civil servants can, you know, work across board, so to speak. I think in terms of what you've posed, strictly speaking, I think devolution is not regressing. On the contrary, I think that it is moving from strength to strength. Of course, we have seen that there are problems of like the flow of funds, and this is why we have said, is it possible to increase the percentage that goes to the counties, or do that as well as give them more power to tax through the Constitution. Because there are even some functions today, if you look at Schedule 4, like library services. We are supposed to do libraries, and that's a very important service, and yet there is no money dedicated to that from the national level. So I think that question, even today, without necessarily any other constitutional change, since only a floor was provided of 15% of monies going to the counties, you can even make that 25, 30, even 45 without any constitutional change whatsoever. I think I would also emphasize benchmarking, meaning counties learning from each other, because there will be no count where there isn't a lot of stuff to learn from. So again, if we continue to learn from each other and to copy from each other the positive things, to copy in a good way. And I like the fact that there is now developing very positive competition. Like, you look at what your neighbor is doing, and it's a good thing, and it is part of our functions, and you benchmark, and then you try to replicate that. I like the fact of these economic blocks, that we may not necessarily go into another layer of devolution, so to speak, but if now the 7 economic blocks, the law comes into being, we are able to work together to develop bigger markets together, bigger projects. That again will be another game changer in terms of development. Of course, we have to commit ourselves to integrity, and we have to accept the oversight roles of both the county assemblies and the Senate. So I think really devolution is definitely a game changer. It is going to grow from strength to strength. Even at some point, it will be harder for the national level to do certain things that are not accepted by the Constitution and ordinary law, because there will be a lot of push from the citizenry itself. The citizens who are beginning to really own devolution and say that this is changing their lives, and therefore they must themselves protect it, both from the governors or county officials as well as from national officials.
Okay. Wanjiru, I'll give you an opportunity to respond if you have assessed as a civil society any area that we have actually clawed back on in terms of devolution.
I think I'd agree with the governor that devolution is working and it's taken us forward. And of course there are challenges. I mean, we've said here there's lots of challenges, and of course there are some indicators that have been affected. But I think we need to recognize that we are implementing a new system, as the governor said. There's a lot of learning to
6 years is still a new system.
It is, actually. They said, properly speaking, devolved systems take about, transition should be 10 to even 15, 20 years because of the level of change. But, you know, I think, for instance, if you look at the aspect of public participation, and if you consider that in the 90s, we were coming from a very closed system, a very repressive system, where even, you know, speaking out your political views was something that could have you thrown into
narrow house.
Yes. Exactly. To where we are now, where citizens are able to challenge decisions that have been made by the governor, or even contribute positively. You know, one of the strong impressions I have, having been a member of the County Budget Economic Forum in Nairobi for some time, was a community-based organization coming up, and really the young lady silenced us and gave a testimony and said, I have, you know, and I can't remember, there was a sister or a friend who was paying something like 20,000 a month because they paying for medicine for non-communicable disease, and asking where is the money for NCDs in the budget. Now, we were sitting there pontificating about all kind of things, and you get this testimonial and you realize people know what their needs are. They just need to be given the platform where they're able to then come and articulate it in a way that government is able to respond. So devolution has taken us forward. I think we need more action on public participation. It's still very tokenistic in a number of counties, because I don't think governors, the county assembly, our political leaders have really embraced what participatory governance is, because it's about power, and it's about giving citizens power so that they are able to express what their needs are, and there's a kind of negotiation. At the end of the day, the responsibility still lies with the governor, because that's the political leadership. But it's about being able to listen and translate what the aspirations of the people are into development needs, and that's where the leadership comes up. So I think devolution is a big win for Kenya, and it needs more support.
Okay. And indeed, we have a lot. If we were to speak about devolution, we'll have the whole night. We would require the whole night to speak about this. But I want to give you an opportunity to close to us. And as you close, one of the most interesting things that a lot of people watching are raising here is the relationship between the county governors and the MCAs, and how they've held the governors hostage for the longest time. If that still happens, I know you had a tricky way of dealing with it in your county. They're also concerned about her health. And Dr. Andrew Saleh is asking, employing health workers on contract is one of the ingenious ways or innovative ways by the counties. You know, it's been a huge issue about nurses in the county. So perhaps you can comment about that, then we can close.
Okay, I think the question of employment, both at the county level and at the national level, as we have indicated earlier, this is something that needs to be looked at from the point of view that we are spending most of the money in salaries and most of the money in recurrent expenditure. And I don't think that we can run away from that if we want to be fair to the citizenry. I think maybe one wants to make the point that, you know, the national government, because it has been in charge for a long time from the center, relates sometimes to the county governments as the big brother, the big sister. And it's sometimes afraid of, you know, these people are flexing their muscles, and they are saying that we can offer services which the national government didn't offer before, and therefore we are God sent to the citizens. In the same way, even us as governors or the county leadership is also afraid of the people, because, you know, we think that if we concede a lot of power to them, as Article 1 of the Constitution says, and as other parts of the Constitution say, then they are going to become unmanageable. So I think there's a point of all of us realizing that the new Constitution, the 2010 Constitution, says that people have to exercise power. It is Wanjiku's time, and therefore public participation really meaning that people must own their government. We must accept this as a reality, because when we do, that is that helps us to even control, the corruption, to control mismanagement, to control, some of those things, and then to advantage the citizen. And that's why I'm excited. This conference, I believe we need to do much more, and perhaps finally to organize it in a different way, so that it is not just being organized by the governors. We now organize it as Kenya, not only the governors, council of governors, so that the Senate, so that the parliament, so that the assembly, so that civil society, so that we now say that this is a devolution assessment by all these stakeholders, so that it isn't just the political people or the governors on their own, so that, and then it talks about what is happening. Not, sometimes, because you can easily talk about the theories and all that kind of stuff, but from a practical point of view, we get reports from this county, this has happened, and we interrogate that, we go and see, and then devolution will have come of age.
Okay. As we close, Wanjiru, the conference is ending in a few days. What do you expect at the end of it? At what point do you think the Devolution Conference 2019, the 6th edition, has achieved?
I think just the discussion, the level of organization is excellent. But what I think I would really want to see is more seriousness about social accountability, more seriousness about public participation, like the governor has said. We want to see money going into civic education. We want to see citizens being enabled to make, to be more engaged. We want to see this element of self-governance really being tested, because the Constitution actually, in the early 90s, African countries came together, and under the African Charter for Public Participation said that people have to be at the center of their own development, because development is supposed to be a liberation exercise. It's not supposed to be forced on people or treat people like they don't know what they want, because that's very disempowering. So I'd really like to see that shift begin to occur, where we really get into, let's test this sovereignty. And if we test it, then what happens? I mean, let's learn from Makueni. What are we learning from this village? What's the difference between a resident in Makueni who's been part of the village governance and somebody who maybe sits in another town who's never engaged in the budget process? You're likely to find more patriotism, more contribution coming from this person, more innovation and ideas about how to improve your country. So what I'd like to see really is more public participation, more social accountability, access to information. We want to see transparency being taken seriously, and compliance with public finance management. We want to see implementation reports. Counties are not producing their quarterly implementation reports, and these implementation reports would allow effective oversight, effective accountability by citizens. So for me, accountability is a big agenda. Accountability. And
Professor, at what point would you think this conference achieved?
Well, I think, for me, I hope it achieves redesigning the nature of this conference, so that it is now an assessment of devolution from the point of view of all stakeholders. That is one thing that I hope we'll achieve. And I think, as I said earlier, even to focus future conferences on concrete things that have happened, so that we review those things. And I hope also we will talk more about the economic blocks, because that's something that is important in terms of making sure that we have economies of scale from units that are larger than the 47, each of the 47 counties.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just read two tweets here. Kagwe think tank says devolution was meant to directly help Wanjiku get a feel of development at close range. However, corrupt plunderers have pocketed money meant for projects, and today Kenyans are paying dearly for devolution. It's now abandoned and should be revised. That's something I wanted to talk about, if indeed we should start rethinking devolution. There is this call for even health to revert completely to the national government. Had that discussion, a lot of people don't agree with it. And Agustin Kimutai says the fault of many of our county leaders lies in the regional sin of our parents. They are not true to devolution. They are grafted on their imperial family ideologies. New generations will come that will free us from the original sin. Just some of the comments are coming, but I want to thank you, Governor Kivutha Kibwana, for coming for the show, and Wanjiru Gikonyo, the national coordinator of TISA, also for coming to share with us your perspective. Always a pleasure, and thank you for speaking to us and sharing your views. We go off air, but remember, we're still online. Governor Kivutha is always on Twitter, right? You can see them tweeting on his behalf, and you're also on Twitter, right? So you can also interact. And the conference continues right here, and obviously NTV will be live for you until the end of the conference. Thanks for watching Sidebar for tonight. Have a good night. Let's do this next week on Tuesday. I'll be in Nairobi. Good night.